So let me hear you. Good and loud. All right, Gary. On 1. On 2. On 3. Take me out to the
Monday Morning Quarterback on the 3rd of December 2018, our first program of the month of September. Beaming down, up, sideways, who knows? Anyway, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We'll start out with college football and where the playoffs. I can recall many years ago at university, there was always talk of a college playoff. Well, we have one now, and this is what it is. Coming from the Washington Post, we'll go to ESPN to do the heavy lifting. The ones that are in there, Oklahoma has joined Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame in the college playoff field, and we'll get to that. Evidently, they had a big disagreement there. The playoff selection committee, which is composed of 13 members, worked until like 1:30 in the morning. And Rob Mullins, he's the athletic director at Oregon, one of the Ducks. Some believed Ohio State should be a number 4. The committee as a whole decided, of course, that Oklahoma should be the number 4 spot with the usual reverberations well beyond a sedated room in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. Oklahoma is 12-1, the Big 12 champion, up from number 5 last week to supply its third playoff berth in a 5-season-old 4-team concept following the 2015-2007. It left Georgia 11-2 and Ohio State, 12-1 in the number 5 and 6 spots. It sustained the reality that no team will lose 2 in the regular season has reached the playoffs, with the tally so far at 6 unbeaten teams and 14 once-beaten ones. Anyway, nonetheless, the semifinal will be between number 4 Oklahoma, number 1 Alabama. That will be on the 29th of December in the Orange Bowl. That's in Miami, Florida, featuring 2 players pegged to be Heisman Trophy types. One, Caleb Murphy, and Tugatulevo. Anyway, he's from Alabama. They have mispronounced his name last year and mispronounced it this year. And in the Cotton Bowl, that is in Dallas or Arlington, where you want to be, number 2 Clemson and number 3 Notre Dame. And then, of course, they will have the big one going on there, period. Let's move to Kamala Harris here. Kamala Harris, she is a senator from California. She'll make a decision over the holidays whether or not to jump into the presidential sweepstakes. That's what she told to NBC. Harris said if she decides to run against DJ Trump, she's preparing for things to get ugly. Well, they will get ugly, given that her candidacy would be a boundary-breaking one. When you break things, it's painful, she said, and you get cut. You bleed. Be some blood there. Other contenders and pretenders here: Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, Twitter king Booker, who got dethroned by DJ Trump, and Joe Biden and Tom Steyer. Anyway, he's a billionaire. He can fund his own campaign. He'll be out there in the Huskings, no doubt about it. Elizabeth Warren, coming from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. It's interesting. They don't mention Bernie Sanders here. And lunchbox Joe Biden, well, we know where he is. He would be the liberal in the race, along with the Senator liberal, or what do you want to call it, Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota. Booker, a Wall Street man, no doubt there. I don't know where he falls in this particular situation. There are a dozen Democrats. Well, there are a lot of Democrats out there starting the 2020 angle and all these various candidates out here. And they name them Kristen Gillibrand and Bernie Sanders. Kristen Gillibrand coming out of New York. A fairly strong candidate there. And old Twitter King out of Newark over in Jersey. Bernie Sanders, I'm surprised they did not name him. And Sherrod Brown, we can forget about him. He's running for vice president, if anything at all. And Chris Murphy, they name him. You can forget about Chris Murphy. And Elizabeth Warren, well, yeah, Elizabeth Warren could be out there. She'll be out there, has a big following into Iowa. In our opinion, the one that would have the heads up in, well, actually 2 or 3, and they don't mention, obviously, here people like Beto O'Rourke, who would do very, very well in Iowa. Amy Klobuchar, because she's next door to Iowa. And then hold out your hand. Bernie Sanders. Bernie has been there before. Bernie would do well in New Hampshire and well in Iowa. Joe Biden, he'll have a contingency there, no doubt, in Iowa, particularly with some of the party people who will get the party regulars. Be an interesting situation, always shapes up in a place like Iowa. Whereas Ms. Harris would come from the West Coast, from the very popular state of California. She's a woman, a person of color. It'd be interesting. We have quite a few women in this contention this time around. Amy Klobuchar, Warren, Kristen Gillibrand, coming out of New York. Another one of these more middle-of-the-road types, but she's come out with Medicare for All. It'll be interesting how this all shapes up, who will, where they will be. We're roughly 2 years out right now before this thing gets going there. But we'll see how it goes. If Harris, the Washington Post makes it here, if she's removed, the only African-American woman is removed. Well, that'll be a very interesting situation there. There are others out there. Don't dismiss old Hillary DeMonster Clinton. She's waiting on the sideline to see if any of these people catch fire. We've had candidates out of the Senate. Barack Obama comes to mind there. We've had governors like old Wild Bill Clinton and, of course, G.W. Bush. And in recent years, vice presidents so haven't fared as well. Last vice president, of course, was George H.W. Bush, and we'll listen to Bob Sheeper talking about him in our little round robin as we leave this particular corner. I think we spent our time there. We'll read a little bit of E.J. Dionne, just because we follow his writings on George H.W. Bush, represent a different kind of Republican. No doubt about that, was legendary for his thank you notes. Reagan wrote a lot of notes himself, and that was of an older generation, wrote thousands of them expressing appreciation for kindness, large and small. And no doubt about that, well, he died at 94. The light of the consequence the consequential life Bush lived lifting up his habit might seem to articulate the trivial. After all, he served bravely in one war, and as president led this country to victory in another. Well, it was much of a war there if you talk about the Iraqi conflict, but he did have sense enough to leave early. In fact, those of missive and appreciation spoke to the qualities that were fundamental to 41, as he's known. He was much shrewder and a tougher politician than we remember. He was a patrician, but a very practical sort, a throwback to a time when elites felt a profound sense of public obligation. Being well-born entitles a commitment to duty and requires meant to live up to certain expectations. Well, he came out of Yale and etc. For all these reasons, Bush represented a different kind of republicanism, period. He was a type of conservative who saw a change and reform as a necessary to the work of conserving what he believed to be fundamentally good society. A fierce partisan, when necessary, he refused to see cooperation with adversaries in the form of ideological treason. As a product of World War II generation, he did not dismiss government as merely a necessary evil. Some of his domestic president, new Clean Air Act of Americans with Disabilities, those are some of the things he will be remembered about. And he also would be remembered about the nonsensical pledge of no new taxes. Well, the government can't progress without that particular situation. Bush was no saint, but saints don't win elections. His campaign against Governor Dukakis, then the governor of Massachusetts, carried a tint of racism. More than that, the elevation of William Horton of Boston as the presidential nominee there, and the Lee Atwater, a political genius of the time, so to speak, a diabolical type character. When he was facing death, of course, he apologized. He said he made Willie Horton, as they call him, if they called him, he was William Horton, Dukakis' running mate, no doubt about that. One day, many years ago, I found myself thinking back to the TV set in a rather partisan way. For what I can't remember, I called my children over to say I didn't appreciate what I had just done, and that's not good for our politics. Has become so divisive. And I told them of a president who voted against the admired enormously for his statesmanship, foreign policy, and basic decency. I hoped for a time when we did not have to become angry or fearful when the other side won an election. The man was talking about George H.W. Bush. Well, that was a different era, and I recalled last night a lady told me that now we have the country back with the election of President Bush, number 41. And this was at the conclusion of the Reagan administration. Now, Bush had ran against Reagan and did not come out, as they say, on the top shelf. But at the same time, Reagan set him in as a vice president, one that had duties to stand around and wait. And he almost did come out of limelight when the attempted assassination of Reagan there. He could have literally became president, which would have changed the whole course of American history. But when we look at these presidents, particularly from this standpoint, the historians will be out there, and one thing to remember about presidential historians, all of them have a slant. And within, say, 10 years, it'd be different history, depending on who is writing that history of the President Bush. But he came out of the Cold War, and he was one of those people that had been at the CIA. He'd been the all-around person. He was evidently involved or was around, and supposedly some said was in Dallas today, the 22nd of November, when President Kennedy was killed. He was in the Republican Party in Texas. And of course, later he'd be at the CIA. He was ambassador to China. He was definitely the go-to person that was in many, many positions of government. He knew Washington very, very well. He'd been in the House from Houston. He ran against even open housing, against the 64 Civil Rights Act, something that Republicans were starting to do. So if we to be fair, his introduction by Lee Atwater to William Horton of Boston was nothing new. This was something that Republicans had been doing since 1968, and the Southern strategy, it worked out for them. It elected a Tricky Dick in a very close election against Hubert Horatio Humphrey. No doubt about it, Humphrey being a Cold Warrior himself. One of the people that destroyed the Democratic, the Farm Labor Party in Minnesota. So this is, it's part of, when you bring out the history, you bring it out in a dialectical situation. What the petty moralizers would say, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the indifferent, they're all there. But there is no comparison today with the D.J. Trump administration and with George H.W. Bush, or even G.W. Bush in his administration. But there is a continual line there between all of these administrations and the various right-wing characters that were in them. More of them were coalesced around Bush too, than obviously around him. But you had Dick Cheney there. Of course, you had General Powell, and you'll hear from him that turned out to be a different type of Republican himself that ended up voting for Barack Obama. And I'm assuming he voted also for Hillary Clinton. And President George H.W. Bush voted for Hillary Clinton. So it sort of tells you where things were and where the foreign policy continued. The Hillary Demonstrative Clinton's policy would have been much more hawkish than what we had from number 41. Anyway, that is remembering number 41. Let us move on here. We'll get back to GM in just a second here. Let's go to where are we going? San Diego. The San Diego Union Tribune here. A new shelter opens. Some make a new life, but holdouts remain. That's outside Bettino Juarez Stadium there in Tijuana. Nicholas Garcia takes a 30-minute cab ride from the migrant shelter on the outskirts of Tijuana to a market in the center of the town to buy fresh fruits. He then goes back to the shelter, which is a vacant space called Batella, and sells vegetables to other migrants. Garcia earns about $9 a day using money to buy foods and other essentials. He is 57 years old. He's from Guatemala. Garcia is one of 2,000 migrants currently living at Batella. Anyway, government officials began moving people out of that site near the border on a Thursday. According to some, Maria Ramez Hernandez, the children are playing more. Some are happy. Well, you have less people there, obviously. Once she gets a permit, Hernandez plans to go to Cadet Juarez across the border. Oh, that is from El Paso, Texas, and worked there for a while. She raises money and finds a way to enter the U.S. Migrants apply for humanitarian visas, can use a free bus service to and from the Mexican immigration office away from the shelter. So these are some of the, I suppose, things that they get. Once the city suspends service, reluctant migrants with no other option move to Bartel. Bartel has erected a tent city directly outside the original shelter, Benito Barres Sports Complex. So basically, things are settling down a bit here. Carlos Gutierrez, he's from also from Honduras, was among the first group of people to move from Benito Juarez to El Retela. He thinks the caravan should stick together and wants to have a group from Barrera go back to Benito Juarez and personally convince the holdouts to join them. That's a lofty term there. So, that is from San Diego, the update there. What we try to do at WBRN here is bring stories forth and follow up on them and not leave things lurching out here. I think we covered last week pretty much the St. Louis police officers that were indicted after literally beating a undercover copper named Hill. That was during the Shockley protest. Shockley was a racist, Jason Shockley, that got away literally with murder. And these were people out there protesting peacefully. Nonetheless, they beat old, did I say Hill? His name was Hall. Destroyed his cell phone. Now they're indicted. And his would-be girlfriend, who claims she didn't know him, is also indicted there for lying to the grand jury. Period. And the district attorney there, her name is Kim Gardner, as said last week, her office has dismissed 91 cases associated with the officers and will continue to review cases where these officers testified or involved in fraudulent activities. Let's just say that. And as the assault occurred there on Hall, the then acting police chief O'Toole asked police union leaders for a donation to cover the cost of a broken camera. Gee. Anyway, that is from St. Louis there, and we'll continue to cover that particular story also. Let's see, we got Alaska here. We have Detroit. And we wanted to get, well, maybe we won't get it. Einstein's God Letter, a virtual massive from 1954. This is in the New York Times here. We posted it up. If he were written now as a series of tweets, they would surely go virtual, no doubt about that. Think of it, one of the greatest, most famous people in the world is panning religion. The word God is, for me, nothing but the expression of and the production of human weakness. The Bible, a collection of vulnerable but still rather primitive legends. The message reads, no interpretation, no matter how subtle, can, for me, change anything about this. This is only 239 characters, including spaces, periods, and commas. well short of the 280-character limit on Twitter. The letter was written in 1954 by Albert Einstein. It's being auctioned this week. It provides a glimpse of Einstein's private thoughts and would probably be inflammatory in today's polarized social media. The page-and-a-half document in German became known a decade ago as the God Letter, nicknamed that makes some Einstein experts wink. But while the letter has to do with Jewish identity and mankind's search for meaning, Einstein used the word God only once in the letter and in the quotation above. He sent a handwritten letter to Erich Gutkind, a German philosopher who has written a book called Choose Life, the Biblical Call to Revolt, that apparently Einstein did not much like. By one account, the book presents the Bible as a call to arms and Judaism and Israel as incorruptible. A review in Commentary magazine said Choose Life was genuinely inspired by a Jewish tradition and challenges a disillusioned generation to prepare the world for the kingdom of God. Einstein wrote the letter that he was disenchanted with Judaism, and even as he said, he was proud to be a Jew. In the letter, Einstein declared, "For me, the unadulterated Jewish religion is, like all religions, as incarnation of primitive superstitions, and the Jewish people to whom I gladly belong, in whose mentality I feel profoundly anchored, still for me does not have any different kind of dignity from other people. As far as my experience goes, they are in fact no better than other human groups, even if they are protected from the worst excesses by a lack of power. Otherwise, I cannot perceive anything chosen about them." And this is one of the things that the future Prime Minister, in our opinion, Mr. Coburn in the UK, he is the leader of the Labour Party, and he's been accused by some of being anti-Semitic. What would they think of Einstein these days? Einstein wrote dozens of letters in which he mentioned God or Judaism. No one should read one Einstein letter and think it solves what he thinks about God. Well, that's just crazy there. That is Walter Isaacson, the author of a 2007 autobiography, said Einstein's views were not totally unchanging. Well, that's just crazy. Anyway, it's selling for 404,000 in London. The buyer was not identified. The Guardian said the evolutionary biologist William Dawson, an outspoken atheist, was one of the higher bidders who lost out. Well, so for the atheists, period. One of the most valuable Einstein letters was a typewritten copy of a 1939 note to FDR, sold at Christie's for $2.1 million. Very interesting there. Einstein often used the term God, no doubt, but it meant different things. There, who teaches philosophy, this is Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein, who teaches philosophy and wrote Plato at the Googleplex. Why philosophy won't go away. Anyway, I'm not sure what she wrote here. Every time he was asked if he believed in God, he answered, "Occasionally I believe in Spinoza's God," she said, referring to the 17th century Dutch thinker who drew from Jewish religion and history. If you say I believe in Spinoza's God, that's already saying you don't believe in what most people believe who believe in God. So in other words, we go on with this, but this was in the Times. Very thoughtful by James Barron on the 2nd of December. Okay, we got it out. It had been sitting on the desktop here quite literally for a very long time. I was trying to find one more, and I guess I'm not going to find it here. This is Mr. Clarence Page. We'll get him in real quickly here. A black Republican's dream deferred again. He's talking here about Mia Love. She's from Utah. She was an American-born daughter of a Haitian immigrant. There she raised sort of excitement in the Grand Old Party's conservative ranks. That elected Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York has awakened the Democrats. There's no comparison here. I'd have to disagree with Mr. Even as an African American who is old enough to remember when both parties competed vigorously for the black vote, as Mr. Page called it, felt encouraged to see Republicans applaud a woman of color in the Obama administration, countering the party of Lincoln's image as a bastion of white male power in the era of President Obama. She won the 4th Congressional District in Utah by 7,000 votes. That was in 2014. She's reelected by 54%, but she bit the dust there. Ben McAdams, he was the mayor of Salt Lake County, defeated her, and that was it. And Mia Love gave me no love. She lost. That's from DJ Trump himself. Now, but she lost re-election. She says in her concession speech in Salt Lake City, she is free to speak her mind, and she did, particularly about DJ Trump. The president's behavior towards me made me wonder what did he have to gain by saying such a thing about a fellow Republican. Love question, it's not really about asking him to do more, was it? Or was it? Saying something. The president, well, Mr. President, we'll have to chat about that. Actually, Trump had little to gain from his personal attacks, except a self-prescribed theory about the drubbing his party took in losing the House. When Trump is confronted by stress-induced realities, he sometimes stages surly and combative exchanges with reporters. Love was not loving that. However, this gave me a clear vision of the world as it is. She continued, no real relationships, just convenient transactions. This is an insufficient way to implement a sincere service in policy. That the basis of the Grand Old Party's problem with minority voters, she said, it's a transactional, it's not personal. Well, Mia Love finally figures that out. To conclude this up, this was a major mission for Mia Love. She is now headed out the door, but she's young, and we'll see where she's back. Well, perhaps she should change her parties and become more progressive, and then she would have a chance to be in the ball game again. We'll do the well. First of all, we'll got to pick the bowls, picking each and every winner, including the championship. This is from Adam Reitenberg. Full transparency, I had a bad year last year. Well, okay. Anyway, seriously, I went 19-22, which included the national championship prediction of Clemson beating Oklahoma. How that turned out. Only one correct. New Year's 6 predictions. Wisconsin over Miami, such as SMU over Louisiana. Anyway, Louisiana Tech won the game 51 there. Appalachian Toledo over Appalachian State. Appalachian State shut them out. Anyway, we'll go to this year. The Air Force Bowl, North Carolina A&T versus Alcorn State. That'll be at the Mercedes-Benz Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia. Prediction is North Carolina over Alcorn State, 27-20. Well, I don't know. Alcorn State hasn't been, as they say, in the ball game much lately. The next game will be the New Mexico Bowl, North Texas and Utah State. That will be in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He sees Utah State 38-29 over North Texas. I don't have any comment on this. The next game will be Tulane and Louisiana. Where will that thing be? Camping World. That's in Orlando, Florida. Prediction is Louisiana over Tulane. I have no idea on that. The Mitsubishi Las Vegas Bowl, Fresno State and Arizona State. He's picked Fresno State over Arizona State. The Raycom Bowl, let's see, Georgia Southern versus East Michigan. Oh boy. Georgia Southern over East Michigan there. A lot of these strange bowls. The Carrier Bowl, that'll be in New Orleans. The Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Anyway, Middle Tennessee versus Appalachian State. He's got Middle Tennessee over Appalachian State. On December 18th, what do we have? UAB versus Northern Illinois. He's got UAB over Northern Illinois. On the 19th, the old Fiesta Bowl, San Diego State versus Ohio in Frisco, Texas. I'm not sure on that one. Anyway, Ohio State, he's got there nonetheless. Marshall versus South Florida. Where will that thing be? In Tampa, Florida. Well, he's got Marshall over South Florida. On the 21st, we got a bowl in the Bahamas. That is Florida International versus Toledo. He's got Toledo over Florida International. Who cares? Anyway, the Idaho Potato Bowl, Warren, Michigan versus BYU. That is in Boise, Idaho. He's got BYU. I think that may be a safe choice. The Memphis versus Wake Forest. That'll be at Logan Field in Birmingham, Alabama on the 22nd. And he's got Wake Forest over Memphis. The Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl. That'll be in Houston versus Army. That'll be at Amos Carter Stadium in Fort Worth, Texas. Dollar General, another one of these bowls. Yeah, who we got here? Buffalo versus Troy. He's got Troy over Buffalo 28-25. In Hawaii, we've got Louisiana Tech versus Hawaii out there. 30C. He's got Hawaii, actually Louisiana Tech. On the 26th, what do we got going on here? Boston College versus Boise State. That'll be in the old Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas. He's got Boise State over Boston College. The Quick Lane Bowl, no idea. That'll be at Ford Field in Detroit. Minnesota versus Georgia Tech. He's got Georgia Tech over Minnesota. And at the Chase Field in Phoenix, who do we have there? Cal versus TCU. He's got TCU in that one. And on the 27th, Temple versus Duke. That'll be in Louisiana. In New Orleans. Shreveport, excuse me. He's got Temple there over Duke. And let's see. Outdoor Texas Bowl. Baylor versus Vanderbilt, that will be in Houston, Texas. He's got Vanderbilt over Baylor. And then Miami versus, this is one of the most oddball ones when I read it earlier, versus Wisconsin. That will be in Yankee Stadium, and not heard of a bowl being there. They should call this the Disappointment Bowl, as the two preseason top 10 teams fell massive short of expectations. Anyway, they have Wisconsin over Miami. And on the 28th, in Nashville, who will they have? Purdue versus Auburn. Camping World Bowl, West Virginia versus Syracuse. That'll be in Orlando, Florida on the 28th as we move towards New Year's Day, I suppose. Iowa State versus Washington State. That's the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. At least it'll be warm there. He has Washington State over Iowa State. And Florida versus Michigan. That'll be in Atlanta. He has Michigan over Florida. South Carolina versus Virginia. Who is that? They'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina. Boy. Arkansas State versus Nevada. That'll be in Tucson. At least it'll be warm in Tucson. College football playoff game at the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. That's Notre Dame versus Clemson. That'll be on ESPN. College football semifinal, the old Orange Bowl. That will be at the Hard Rock Stadium. Okay. Anyway, they've changed it there. And on the 31st, Cincinnati versus Virginia Tech of December, that is. And several games there. Boy, we're running out of gas here. Stanford versus Pitt. He has Stanford over Pitt. Oregon and Michigan State. They'll be in Santa Clara, California. And then we have Missouri versus Oklahoma State. The AutoZone, that's the Liberty Bowl. Where's the Liberty Bowl? Memphis, Tennessee. The Holiday Bowl, San Diego Credit Union Holiday Bowl. Boy, Northwestern versus Utah. I don't know who's going to have this bowl. Who is even carrying it? We don't know. Anyway, he has Utah up here. The Gator Bowl, that used to be a major bowl. That'll be in Jacksonville, Florida. North Carolina State versus Texas A&M. And on January the 1st, Mississippi State versus Iowa. That is at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. The Citrus Bowl, Kentucky versus Penn State. And he has Penn State here over Kentucky. The Fiesta Bowl, LSU versus UCF. That'll be at the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. The old Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, Washington versus Ohio State. He has Ohio State there. The Sugar Bowl, the All-State Sugar Bowl, who is that? Texas versus Georgia. And January the 7th, the College Football Playoff National Championship. That will be Clemson versus Alabama. That will be in Santa Clara, California. And the Green Bay Packers, well, they lost their coach. I don't even know who it should be. I don't usually cover the NFL. He just was sitting there. Anyway, nonetheless, the Suns were in Los Angeles. Lakers 122-96. The Pelicans were at the Hornets. Pelicans 119-109. The Jazz were at the Heat. Heat 102-100 there. The Grizzlies were in the city of Brotherly Love. 76ers 103-95. The Clippers were in Dallas. Don't hear that name much these days. 114-110 Mavericks. And finally, in San Antonio, the Spurs 131 to 118. And to the NHL, the National Hockey League, the Ducks of Anaheim and the Capitals in D.C., I believe. 6-6 was tied up. Was the final there. Or was it 6-5? 6-5. Need to put my glasses on. Anyway, it was 6-5. So the Ducks were the winners there. The Jets and Rangers 4-3. It was the Jets over the Rangers in an overtime. Sudden death. Sorry about that. And the Sharks and the Canadiens. It was the Sharks 3-1. The Avalanche and the Red Wings in the Motor City. It was the Avalanche shut out the Red Wings. The Flames and Blackhawks in Chicago. It was the Flames 3-2. And finally, the Hurricanes and Kings. The Hurricanes were shut out. It was the Kings 2-0 there. So we've taken care of sports. We've taken care of our tribute to George H.W. Bush. We got in what was happening there. We didn't get Alaska. Well, I guess we'll have to come back to them. Oh, let me just very quickly here. This is from the Detroit Free Press. GM's secret plan to shut plants, cut jobs, likely signal more to come. This is the Free Press by Jamie Leria, it looks like here. Anyway, it was written 28th of November, so it came up a little bit. Anyway, turns out no one can keep a secret as well as the leadership at GM. On the 20th, the automobile's board of directors decided they would approve the plan for massive cuts to proportion of plants by the end of the year, U.S. proportion plants, and combined with white collars, about 14,000 jobs. I'm saying there's 15,000. Anyway, it finally came out, leaked out on the 25th. A secret safe, a document GM filed Monday with the Securities and Exchange Commission says that on the 20th of November, GM's board of directors approved a plan to accelerate the company's transformation for the future. The plan is expected to strengthen the company's core business, capitalize on the future of personal mobility, and drive significant cost efficiencies, and it consists in relevant parts of restructuring of global product development, a group realigning current manufacturing capacity and utilization, reducing salaries and contract staff and capital expenditures. These actions are expected to be substantially completed by the end of next year, 2019. The brief fill-out did not align the extra plan. It noted that GM will report pre-tax charge of $3 billion to $3.8 billion because of reduction there. The UAW, the United Auto Workers, big worry, was equally surprised that GM kept the plan hush for 6 days. GM will close the Detroit Hammerach plant, Lordstown in Ohio, and Oshawa in Ottawa, Canada, by the end of the year. It includes 645 jobs at the transmission plant in Warren, Ohio, and near Baltimore, more than 6,200 hourly jobs at stake there in Maryland. Most UAW workers will have opportunity to transfer to other factories, including Flint and Arlington, Texas, where in-demand trucks are produced. The plants being idled make cars that are out of favor with consumers, and it includes the Buick LaCrosse, the Cadillac XTS, the Chevrolet Volt, and the Volt is supposedly going to be one of their newer deals here. The deadline, let's see. In addition to production cuts, GM said it will reduce its North American white-collar workforce by 8,000. The deadline passed on the 19th for voluntary buyouts for those workers. GM said 2,250 workers have asked to take the offer. So some are taking the offer. It depends, I suppose, on how long they got. If they're close to retirement, they're probably saying bye-bye. Rutenberg said that the UAW discussed the affected plants with GM in the past and drew a clear line in the sand on U.S. plants. Who should worry? Industry experts say GM's secrecy about the cost cutting is impressive, but the plan itself should not be surprising. One ship plant's not financially sustainable. That's from Diziak. We already talked about this. At Automotive Research in Ann Arbor, the U.S. market is not growing and consumers prefer SUVs to sedans. Everyone in Oshawa, Lordstown, and Detroit should have been worried, as should workers in other one-ship plants at all automakers. Yeah, these one-ships have been cut down. In the old days, you had two and perhaps three ships. Given that her tenure with the company, she likely has a good pulse of what changes that need to be made even before becoming CFO. That's from Guri. There is no doubt that she played a significant role in implementing these changes. Now, this is Diziak and said GM's new, this is CFO, I don't want to try to pronounce the name, was likely instrumental in devising the scheme. So that is out of the Motor City, and this will do it for us. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon as we continue programming. Incidentally, we have an open source report coming. We'll be looking at cloud computing, what's happening in cloud computing with the Red Hat acquisition by IBM, and what's the future of cloud computing, and we throw in some of these other behemoths there. So we'll have a little economics thrown in. We incidentally have a new numbers man. That is our economics program. It is on WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. The numbers man part.